My dear brothers, today I would like to share with you the blessings that we receive during the Mass. There are 9 important blessings that we receive during the Mass. Some years ago, I had gone to a convent to preach a retreat, and one of the sisters came and shared with me a problem. She was in charge of the boarding children, and they have to go for Mass every morning. And some of the girls did not want to get up at 5 in the morning during winter time. So they asked the sister, why should we get up at 5 in the morning during this cold weather and go for Mass? What do we get during the Mass? And the sister told them that if you attend the Holy Mass, you receive blessings. So the girls asked the sister, what blessings do we get? What are the names of the blessings? When do we get the blessings? And the sister was not too sure what are the blessings and when do we get them. So she asked me, Father, can you explain what are the blessings that we get and when do we get them? And there are 9 important blessings that we get. Today, I would like to share with you 3 important blessings that we get during the Mass. To understand the different blessings that we get, we need to look back at the time when Christ was here on earth. And when Christ was here on earth, he imparted many, many blessings on many different occasions. But all the different blessings that Christ had imparted can be classified into 3 important and different types of blessings. And the first blessing that Christ gave was on children. The name and the fame of Christ had spread to different places. And therefore, whenever Christ would go to a place, the mothers would bring the children to Jesus, as we find in St. Matthew's Gospel, chapter 19, verses 13 to 15. And whenever Christ would go to a place, the mothers would bring their children and they would tell Jesus to lay his hand on the forehead and bless them. And so many mothers would bring the children to Jesus to be blessed by him that the apostles began to stop the mothers bringing the children to Jesus for blessing. And that is the time the Lord had said that famous sentence, "Let the children come to me, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." And why did the mothers bring the children? Because they knew that his blessing had a powerful effect and impact in the lives of the children. And the second blessing the Lord gave during his lifetime was totally a different blessing. And this blessing Christ gave during the Last Supper on the bread and the wine. And during the Last Supper, he had done 5 important things. The first important thing that Christ did was to preach a long homily, an explanatory homily to his apostles. And the second thing he did was to institute the priesthood. And the third was to institute the Eucharist. And then the fourth thing that he did was that he instructed them that they must do this in his memory. And with that, Christ promised that he would be with them till the end of time. There were also many other things that Christ did during the Last Supper. But the most important and the significant thing that he did during the Last Supper was to change the bread and the wine into the body and the blood of Christ. And how did Christ do that? By imparting a blessing on the bread and the wine. And he was able to change the bread into his own body and change the wine into his own blood. And that is what we find in St. Matthew's Gospel, chapter 26 of St. Matthew's Gospel, verses 26 to 29, where we come across very clearly about how Christ was able to change the bread and the wine into the body and the blood of Christ. And the third blessing Christ gave was on the apostles. Before he ascended to heaven, he called his apostles. Now there were only 11 apostles, and he had called the 11 apostles to a place called Bethany. And when he had called the apostles to that place at Bethany, he gave them a long homily. The last homily he had preached to his apostles. And after having preached the last homily to his apostles, he lifted his hands and he blessed them. And why did Christ bless the apostles? Because he gave them a command. And the command we find in St. Mark's Gospel, chapter 16, verses 15. Go and proclaim the good news to the whole world. And to carry out that command of going out and proclaiming the good news, Christ lifted his hands and he blessed the apostles. And in and through that blessing, the apostles had received two important things. They had received courage to go out and fearlessly to preach. And the second thing they had received through that blessing was sufficient knowledge. And that knowledge which they had received from Christ, they were courageously and fearlessly able to share with other people. And these three blessings, blessings on children, blessings during the Last Supper on the bread and on the wine, and the last blessing on his apostles before he ascended into heaven. These were the three most important blessings that Christ gave during his lifetime here on earth. And he had wanted that these three blessings he must continue to give to us. He must continue to share with each and every one of us. And therefore, he had decided that he would continue to share these three important blessings during the Mass. And it is only through the Mass, only during the Mass, we could receive these three important blessings. And so the first blessing that Christ gave on the children, and that same blessing we all of us receive. And how do we receive the first blessing? And the first blessing is known as the Trinitarian blessing. Everyone, the priests, the readers, the choir members, the people, the usherers, and everybody stand around the altar during the Mass, before the Mass begins, as children of God. Every one of us is a child of God. And we call upon God. We want God to come into our midst. And we begin to sing hymns. And as we begin to sing hymns, and we begin to call on the name of God with great hope, with great expectation, and with hope and expectation that we are going to be blessed by the triune God. And so, with joy, with happiness, with hope, we stand around the altar calling upon the name of God. And the triune God comes down upon each and every one of us. And then, as we make the sign of the cross at the beginning of the Mass together, the priest, the celebrants, the concelebrants, the altar servers, the choir members, the people, everybody together, we make the sign of the cross. And as we make the sign of the cross, it is the calling on the name of the triune God. And it is the triune God who touches each and every one of us. And in and through touching our forehead, our heart, and our hands, our shoulders, we receive the Trinitarian blessing. The triune God, by touching us, the God animates our thinking, animates our feeling, animates our doing. And the meaning of the word to animate is to make alive, अनुप्राणित करना, जिसका मतलब यही है जो प्राण ईश्वर हमें दिए हैं उस प्राण को नवीनीकरण द्वारा फिर से पुनर्जीवित होकर जीने के लिए ईश्वर हम सबों को इस आशीष दिलाते हैं. Trinitarian blessing. And in Hindi, we call the Trinitarian blessing as Pavitra Tritva ki आशीष. पवित्र त्रित्व की आशीष. जो मिस्सा के शुरू में सभी लोग उम्मीद, आशा, भक्ति के साथ बड़ी खुशी और आनंद से पवित्र त्रित्व को आमंत्रित करते हैं और पवित्र त्रित्व हमारे बीच में आकर जैसे ही हमें स्पर्श करते हैं उस स्पर्श द्वारा हमें अनुप्राणित करते हैं, हम पर स्वयं आशीष बरसाते हैं और उस आशीष को हम मिस्सा के शुरू में स्वीकार करते हैं और उसका नाम है पवित्र त्रित्व की आशीष. And the second blessing that we receive during the Mass is at the middle of the Mass. And that is the time we must believe that every priest has been given a special power, a special privilege to share the divine power to transform the bread and the wine into the body and the blood of Christ. And the priest whose hands are consecrated, anointed on the day of his ordination, he makes a very deliberate and a very conscious intention to bless the bread, to bless the wine, and in and through blessing the bread and blessing the wine, he is able to transform the bread and the wine into the body and the blood of Christ. And this transformed body and the blood of Christ is for us to be nourished so that we can be nourished with the body and the blood of Christ. And when we are nourished by the body and the blood of Christ, Christ would become one with us. He comes into us, and as he is united with us, he becomes one with us, and he continues to remain with each and every one of us. And not only he comes and remains with us, but he also continues to sustain our life through the Eucharist. And that is why the transforming blessing is a very, very important blessing. It is a blessing through which Christ is able to change the nature of the bread into the nature of his own body. And he is able to change the nature of the wine into the nature of his blood. And because he is able to bring about such a great change, we call that as a transforming blessing. The word form in philosophy means substantial form, nature. So, in and through the transforming blessing, the body and the blood of Christ, or the body, the bread and the wine, are changed into the body and the blood of Christ. And this blessing has two parts. And the first part is when the priest makes the intention, when he says, "May this bread and wine change into the body and the blood of Christ." And that's the time he makes the blessing on the bread and the wine. And that is the first part where the priest makes clearly a deliberate intention, wanting to change the bread and the wine into his own body and the blood of Christ. And after having made the intention and after having blessed, then he is actualizing the blessing. He makes that intention become real. And that is the time he says, he takes the bread and he pronounces the words, "This is my body." And the moment he says, the intention is transformed into actual. And both the things together is known as a transforming blessing. And then he takes a cup of wine and he says, "This is the chalice of my blood." And then the wine transforms into the blood of Christ. So the transforming blessing has two parts. The first part is the intention, and after the intention, he blesses, or during the intention, he blesses. And once the intention is over, he takes the bread, he takes the wine, and separately actualizes and completes the transforming blessing. And the transforming blessing in Hindi is called, the transforming blessing in Hindi is called परिवर्तनीय आशीष. परिवर्तनीय आशीष जिसका तात्पर्य है कि जो रोटी और दाखरस के रूप में ईश्वर मेज पर पाते हैं अंतिम भोजन के समय, उन्होंने स्वयं चाहा कि रोटी और दाखरस को अपने शरीर और अपने लहू में परिवर्तित करने के बाद उसे एक दान के रूप में, तोहफा के रूप में लोगों को प्रदान करने के लिए, इसलिए ईश्वर परिवर्तनीय आशीष द्वारा रोटी और दाखरस को अपने ही स्वयं शरीर और रक्त में बदलने के बाद उस रोटी और दाखरस को जो अभी ख्रिस्त का शरीर और लहू बन गया है, उसे लोगों को दान के रूप में, तोहफा के रूप में उन्होंने अर्पण किए, उन्होंने हमें दिए थे और हर रोज मिसा के वक्त देते रहते हैं। इसलिए परिवर्तनीय आशीष बहुत ही महत्व है। हम कह सकते हैं पवित्र मिस्सा में केंद्र बिंदु है परिवर्तनीय आशीष। जिस मिस्सा में परिवर्तनीय आशीष नहीं है वह तो मिस्सा हो ही नहीं सकता है। इसलिए परिवर्तनीय आशीष इस बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण है। It is very, very important during the Mass. And the third blessing that we receive is the apostolic blessing. The apostolic blessing is given by the priest at the end of the Mass. At the end of the Mass, before the people leave, just like Christ had blessed the apostles and he had given to them knowledge and courage to go out and proclaim the good news, so too Christ, the priest, at the end of the Mass, he also gives them a blessing. And exactly the same blessing he gives them. And it is like an apostolic blessing. It is very similar to an apostolic blessing. And why it is very similar to an apostolic blessing? Because Christ had blessed the apostles. Today, the priests are not blessing the apostles, but the priests are blessing the people. But it is a very similar blessing. And that is why it is like an apostolic blessing. And in and through that blessing, the people receive two things from that blessing, the apostolic blessing. We receive knowledge. We receive the knowledge from the first reading, from the gospel, from the Psalms, and also from the homily. So it is so important for the priest to preach a homily well. It is also important that the first reading and the gospel be proclaimed. And in and through the proclamation, people are able to get knowledge from the Bible, knowledge about the Word of God. And also that in and through the apostolic blessing, we receive courage to go out and proclaim the good news. So तीसरी आशीष जो मिसा के अंत में हम प्राप्त करते हैं, उस आशीष को हम कहते हैं हिंदी में प्रेरितीय आशीष, क्योंकि वह आशीष तो प्रेरितों पर दिए गए थे। और इन तीनों आशीषों को सिर्फ हम मिसा के समय प्राप्त कर सकते हैं। And if we want to receive these three blessings, पवित्र त्रित्व की आशीष, परिवर्तनीय आशीष, प्रेरितीय आशीष, there are some conditions. There are some conditions which must be fulfilled for us to receive. So I want to tell you a story. When I was a parish priest in one of our parishes in Delhi, we used to have 7 masses, and every mass begins on the dot. If it is 9 o'clock, exactly at 9 it would start, and it would last for about 50 to 55 minutes. And then by 9:55, the people would be out. So all the people would come for Mass before the Mass begins, except one family. And every Sunday they would come during the homily or during the gospel. And then as soon as the final blessing is over, before the last hymn, they would leave the church. But one Sunday, I had preached about the 3 blessings. And then I went out to meet the people. The people were gone. And there is the next Mass at 10:30. So that particular family, which always came late, that day they were waiting. So he asked the man, what happened? Every Sunday you come late and you leave as soon as the Mass is over. Why are you waiting today? So he said, Father, my wife had scolded me. She had scolded me for coming late for Mass. And she said, we did not receive the first blessing today. And therefore, we will wait for the next Mass to begin. And when the next Mass begins at 10:30, we would receive the first blessing and then we would go home. So, the moral of the story is the first condition for receiving the three blessings is we must be present from the beginning of the Mass till the end of the Mass to receive all the three blessings. And the second important thing is we must be awake during the Mass. Sometimes you go, people come for Mass and some are sleeping, some are not attentive. Perhaps they don't receive all the three blessings because to receive the three blessings, you must be awake. And the third thing is we must believe that the Lord would bless us during the Mass. We must certainly and definitely must have faith that it is only during the Mass we would receive these three important blessings. And the fourth important thing is we must be open. Our hearts and minds must be open to receive the blessings. If we have closed ourselves to receive the blessings, then certainly we won't be able to receive the blessings from God during the Mass. And the fifth important thing is once we have opened ourselves, we also must accept the blessings when the Lord shares with us, when the Lord gives to us his blessings. And after having accepted the blessings, the next important thing that we must do is to assimilate, to make the blessing part of our life. The blessings should be transformed into ourselves. And once the blessings are transformed into ourselves, we should also be grateful, grateful to God for blessing us. And then, after having been grateful to God, we must make an effort to live the blessings in our life. The blessings we receive during the Mass, they continue to have an effect in our life. And therefore, we must make sure that the effect continues to live in our life. And the next important thing is, the ninth important thing is, we must allow the power of the blessings to change us, to transform us, because the blessing is a power that God shares with us. And lastly, the effect of the blessings would animate our life. अनुप्राणित अनुप्राणित करेगा हमारे जीवन को. So the blessings would continue to have a great effect in our life. And that is precisely why it is important for us to remember that there are 9 important blessings, but now I have shared with you 3 important blessings that we share, that we receive during the Mass. And the 3 important blessings are, at the beginning of the Mass, मिस्सा के शुरू में हम प्राप्त करते हैं पवित्र तृत्व की आशीष. बड़ी उम्मीद, आशा, खुशी से हम पवित्र तृत्व से, जैसे कि पवित्र तृत्व हमें स्पर्श करते हैं, उसी के द्वारा हम पवित्र तृत्व की आशीष को प्राप्त करते हैं. और मिस्सा के बीच में हम परिवर्तनीय आशीष को प्राप्त करते हैं जिसे हम विश्वास करते हैं ख्रीस्त खुद अपने आप को अपने शरीर और लहू को रोटी और दाखरस रोटी और लहू में अपने ईश्वर ने अपने रोटी और दाखरस को अपने शरीर और लहू में परिवर्तित किए हैं उस परिवर्तनीय आशीष द्वारा। और उसी को हम कहते हैं मिसा के केंद्र बिंदु। और आखिरी आशीष हम मिसा के अंत में प्राप्त करते हैं प्रेरित आशीष, जिसके द्वारा ज्ञान और शक्ति निर्भयता प्राप्त करते हैं, ताकि जिस ज्ञान को हम मिसा में प्राप्त किए हैं उसे निडरता से निर्भयता से दूसरों को हम बांट सकें। प्रिय भाइयों, मैं बड़ी खुशी और आनंद से यही उम्मीद करता हूं कि आप इन तीनों आशीषों पर मनन चिंतन करने के बाद इस बात को दूसरों को बांटने के लिए भी प्रयास कीजिए, क्योंकि मिसा का महत्व तभी सभी लोग जान सकते हैं जब वे इन आशीषों के बारे में जानेंगे। अगले भाषण में या इन दिनों में मैं आखिरी 6 आशीषों के बारे में भी आप लोगों को बताऊंगा, और उन आशीषों को जो हम मिसा में प्राप्त करते हैं उन्हें बताने से पहले हम जिस तरीके से आशीषों को प्राप्त करते हैं उन्हीं को भी मैं आप लोगों को बताना चाहता हूं। धन्यवाद। God bless you. And continue to pray that the retreat may go well, and also continue to pray that I may do my responsibility well. God bless you and thank you.